Welcome into the official Jets podcast.
I eat, breathe, and sleep the New York Jets, my team.
He knows what it means to wear the green and white.
That is a tightrope walk across Niagara Falls. That's hard to do.
The official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
Baldy, so great to see you again, my friend. You're looking good. You brought the guns out to the pod today.
Yep, thank you. Well, sun's out, guns are out right now. I mean, it's vacation season, EA. So I'm ready to enjoy it for a little bit.
So Super Bowl Sunday, Baldy, Jay Glazer broke it first, I believe. He said that Aaron Rodgers flew back to New Jersey last week to meet with the Jets. And at that point, the Jets informed him they were going to move on at quarterback. Your thoughts when you heard that news?
I think it's the right move. I mean, Aaron was here for 2 years. It created a great buzz. Obviously, the first year was a massive disappointment. And in large part, last year was a massive disappointment. He was expected to raise the level of play around him to get the Jets to the playoffs, and they fell way short. And I just think when you bring in a new coach, you bring in a new general manager, like you should start fresh. And Darren Moogie, who's a new GM, they cut the cord last year to Russell Wilson. And he was supposed to be their Aaron Rodgers, and he wasn't. And Sean Payton's like, let's just cut our losses. Let's go with the rookie. Let's start fresh. And I feel like that's what the Jets should do right now. I think the Aaron Rodgers era should be over. I'm not surprised they said that. I don't think Aaron's shocked or even disappointed at this point. Like, he knows what he was brought here to do, and he wasn't able to deliver. And that wasn't all his fault, obviously. But still, nothing changed with Aaron. So I think they made this change. It's an organizational shift. The quarterback is a huge part of it. Like, make the change.
Tough luck for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets following that trade in April of 2023, right, Baldy? There was all the hype, the excitement. Hard Knocks was here in Florham Park, and then Monday Night Football Week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. 4 snaps in, Achilles tendon tear.
Look, I mean, it's going to be part of Jets folklore. Like, I'll never forget the buzz that preseason. Woody Johnson out there saying about, like, everybody wanted to come to training camp. Everybody wanted to come to Florham Park and see Aaron throwing to Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, whatever. But it never materialized. And it was a shock at what we all witnessed that night. Like, nobody could have foreseen that. He'd never suffered a major injury like that. And it just, as much as it was built up, it got deflated immediately. And so then it was about year 2.
Yep.
And there was hype and there was excitement and all this stuff, and it never really got off the ground. And I think the loss to Denver at home in the rain really solidified that. That was a winnable game. They couldn't score from the 1. It sort of epitomized the frustration that every Jet felt last year. That was a winnable game. Defense played great. Denver didn't score a touchdown. The Jets couldn't put Denver away that day.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back at it because Rodgers, historically, this was one of the better passing seasons in franchise history. He passes for nearly 3,900 yards. He has 28 touchdown passes. He has 11 interceptions. And you have to give him a lot of credit for working his way back. He's 41 years old, coming off a devastating injury, and he was able to put up those numbers. So I thought it was gritty. Also, going back to the 2023 season, Baldy, where he just worked his way in order to get back out in the practice field. He was trying to do something that nobody had ever done before.
No, I mean, look, the commitment was there. The commitment on his part was there. Like, nobody can fault Aaron Rodgers for not being committed. But there were games that the Jets could have easily won. The Minnesota Viking game in London. That was a winnable game, EA. You had to make a play down the stretch. Gilmore's beat. You got to make the throw. I mean, Seattle was a winnable game. There's a lot of winnable games. The stats are good. But if Aaron's being honest, and I think he can look in the mirror and be honest, like, there were opportunities to win a lot of these games to get them into December for real meaningful games rather than playing the string out like they did. So, look, I mean, you can't fault anybody from Woody to Joe Douglas to Phil Savage. You can't fault anybody, front office, players, Aaron, for not being committed. The commitment was there. It didn't work out. But I also think this is a young man's game. And, the Super Bowl showed you that the way to win, and I'm in Philadelphia, EA, so I see this firsthand. But when you draft Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter, and you go sign Saquon and Zach Bond, and you develop and you draft Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, you draft and develop, and then you spend your money wisely on key components. There's a formula out there to turn any franchise around very quickly. Remember, the Eagles collapsed last year. It was an ugly collapse. And they just didn't sit idle going, okay, we'll bring back the same team. They changed coaches, coordinators. They changed position coaches. They went out and retooled the whole roster, and here they are, Super Bowl champs.
So following that Vikings game, you mentioned the Broncos game. The Jets entered that ball game at MetLife, a rainy Sunday afternoon. They were 2-1. They had played a complete game against the New England Patriots. They lose to the Broncos. Then they go over and play in London in Week 5 against the Vikings, a team who had a terrific season themselves. Looking back at it, they lose a one-possession game, and then a couple days later, Robert Saleh is dismissed. Jeff Ulbrich is promoted to interim head coach. And then a month later, Joe Douglas dismissed. And you mentioned it before, Phil Savage finishes the year as an interim GM. And then Baldy, in totality, the Jets lost 6 games in the fourth quarter in which they held leads, and they were 3-7 in one-possession games.
Yeah. And, and meanwhile, Kansas City's in the Super Bowl, and they were undefeated in one-possession games. They didn't lose a game, one possession. Like, these games come down to the fourth quarter, EA. And that's where your quarterback had, like, Super Bowl's different, but that's where your star players, including your quarterback, has to step up. If you look at the Eagles' run, I mean, they narrowly beat the Rams, but their star players stepped up in that game. Jalen Carter punched the ball out of Kyron Williams' hands. Jalen Carter sacked Matt Stafford when he's going in to throw a dagger against the Eagles to win the game in the final minute. Your star players and your quarterback have to step up in those big moments in the fourth quarter. That's why you pay the stars the money they do. They've got to change the game. Guys like me that were, part of the roster, starters, not stars, we're just glue players. Your star players have to win games. If you look at the big win that the Jets had this year on Thanksgiving night against the Houston Texans, you think about the catch by Garrett Wilson in the back of the end zone. It's a star play. Like, I don't know how many receivers in this league can make that play. But Aaron threw 3 touchdown passes. Garrett kind of, made the star play of the game, I thought, in that game. Your stars got to win in crunch time, and your quarterback has to deliver. You can put all the stats up there you want. Lamar Jackson and that's what they got to do.
Baldy, overall for this franchise, it was the right move at that time to make the trade for Aaron Rodgers. But now here we are 2 years later. You think it's the right move for the organization to move on?
I do. I do think it's time to move on. I think you have to constantly look. Everybody makes mistakes. And I'm not saying Aaron was a mistake. But everybody has to move on from a quarterback. And different teams do it differently. Last year Denver drafted Bo Nix. It's the first time that Sean Payton has been coaching this league where he had to develop a rookie quarterback. Like, he never had to do that before. He got Drew Brees 4 years into his career. He had a lot of veteran quarterbacks as an assistant coach, in New York and in Philadelphia. But everybody has to find their guy. Everybody has to find their quarterback, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's Detroit getting a second act of Jared Goff, even the Philadelphia Eagles, in 2020 had Carson Wentz, and they just gave him a big fat contract, and they drafted Jalen Hurts with the 53rd pick in the second round. And people question whether Jalen could ever play quarterback in this league. He's just a running back. Well, he's a Super Bowl MVP winning quarterback right now. They developed Jalen, and they got the right coach, and they got the line, and they got the talent around him, and they never stopped building around him. you've got to identify that guy, however you do, and you got to get him, and you have to develop him, and you have to surround him with elite talent.
Baldy, you know it better than anybody, being stationed where You're at. You basically, you're inside all 32 teams, but that's your backyard, Philadelphia. Hurts, as you mentioned, not a first round pick, so he was an anomaly in the playoffs this season. The only other guy I think who was a non first round pick who made the postseason was Russell Wilson, a third round pick back in the day, but Pittsburgh actually picked him up in free agency, of course, prior to the 2024 season. But going back to Hurts, he started out as third on the depth chart, wasn't he, behind Nate Sudfeld?
Yep. Yeah. No, he came in, worked his way up. Carson was the franchise quarterback. Whether you want to believe the reports that Carson felt threatened by Jalen, I mean, Jalen never stopped working. I know Jalen pretty good. Like, he never stops working in his game. He listens to all the noise. He uses everything as fuel, the way a lot of athletes do. But he's been to the play, like he started in 2021. He's been to the playoffs every single year. He's been to 2 Super Bowls right now. He's won a ton of playoff games. The guy's an elite athlete, elite runner, led the Super Bowl in rushing. He beats you a lot of different ways. They wanted to stack the box and take Saquon away in that game. He delivered. He delivered an MVP performance. They picked the right guy. But that was the 53rd pick. He wasn't supposed to be the starter. Yeah. But you know what? Competition's a good thing. You can never have enough. You never have enough competition, but you can never have enough talent on your team. You got to continually add to it, and that's what Philadelphia has shown the whole league.
You mentioned it before. How beneficial will that Denver experience be for for Darren Muji, who was working with George Payton there with the Broncos when they took a number of swings at the quarterback position, and then specifically with Russell Wilson, they said, hey, it's not working out. We're going to eat that money. And now they go and draft their guy in Bo Nix.
Not just that, but they made the playoffs with Bo Nix. Yeah. And all you did, I mean, I tracked Bo Nix from week 1, where he literally could not complete a pass to a wide receiver the first 2 weeks of the season. And you thought, what did they get? And by the end of the year, he was winning games for you and taking care of the football and becoming a legitimate, prospect that you could see Denver competing for playoff spots every year with Bo Nix. And he started all 18 games for him. So they got the right guy. Now, I think he was the 4th or the 5th quarterback drafted last year. But Atlanta feels good about, Michael Penix Jr. I think Washington struck gold. I think Caleb is going to find a good home with his new coach. Like, you got to draft these guys wherever you draft them, and you got to give them every chance to develop. And you got to get good coaches around them to do it with. And so that's where the Jets are at. Whether it's, I believe they should sign a free agent quarterback and they should draft a quarterback, and get the best possible prospect they can, regardless of how many assets it takes to do it. Like, you got to get that guy in your building, and you have to start, showing the belief in him and the ability to build around him.
All right, I'm glad you just brought that up. So let's speak a little bit about 2025 options. Tyrod Taylor is currently on the roster. He's been a member, of course, of 7 different organizations, 62% passer over the course of his career, Baldy, 68 career touchdown passes, 29 interceptions, hasn't started more than 6 games in the season since 2017. Jordan Travis was a draft pick, working his way back from that devastating ankle injury at Florida State in 2023. Adrian Martinez signed a futures deal here in January. Those are the 3 guys currently on the roster.
Look, I mean, Tyrod, you mentioned all the teams he's been on. I mean, he was there with Josh Allen. He was in the Chargers with Justin Herbert, and scheduled to start and got a puncture wound to the chest, and Justin took over. They never looked back. I mean, he's been in that seat where he's been the guy, and then a Baker Mayfield. He was in Cleveland with Baker, and Baker, beat him out, by the 4th game. I think it was the Jets game when Baker came in and took over on Thursday night. But, he's been in this role. He knows his role, but he still is athletic. He still can win games for you. He can still put a game plan together. I think he's very capable of being a bridge quarterback right now. But I wouldn't be comfortable with Jordan Travis and
Adrian Martinez.
And Adrian and Tyrod right now. I mean, I I would look real hard at drafting a quarterback as high as I possibly could.
So we're going to get back to the draft here in a second. A former Jet quarterback, Sam Darnold, broke out under Kevin O'Connell there last year in Minnesota. He could be a free agent. Justin Fields, who of course started his season with the Steelers last year. He made those 6 starts before Russell Wilson took over. Maybe Russell Wilson is out there as well. Former Giants quarterback Daniel Jones could be out there in the market. Now a lot of people are speculating that Kirk Cousins possibly could be released.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be awkward to bring Sam Darnold back, and to pay him, elite money after, his tenure here ended, without fanfare. I think it would be awkward, but you have to, like, honestly, Darren's got to really look at every option, and Aaron Glenn. They got to look at every single option carefully. All right, it's an important decision. So, I mean, everybody is on the table. If Derek Carr gets released, is he on the table? If Kellen Moore goes in there and said, we want to start fresh, all these, like, you have to look at every prospect. Nobody thought that Sam Darnold could have done what he did this year. Nobody that watched him in Carolina or the Jets or even one game in San Francisco. Nobody could have predicted that he could have played that well, won that many games. But that's what you have to do. Like, you have to take each guy, put him in a vacuum and say, okay, if we put elite offensive line in front of them like they did in Minnesota, at least a very good line, and an elite running back and receivers, what can he do? And by the way, they led the league in takeaways. So they got a lot of extra at-bats, coming back to Sam. But you have to, nobody could have predicted that Baker Mayfield would win 2 straight division titles and win playoff games at Tampa until you put a team around him and gave him an opportunity.
Yeah, those guys both cast-offs, right? Baker Mayfield and then Sam Darnold, and they resurrect their careers.
Yes, and so and we started off this conversation with talking about Jalen Hurts was the 53rd pick. So I don't know if Riley Leonard can be that guy, at a Notre Dame, and if he's a 3rd-round pick, if he's got great athleticism, he's got shortcomings. They said that about Jalen. I remember doing a college game when Jalen was the starting quarterback at Alabama. And they were playing Texas A&M. They were both undefeated. And I thought Jalen Hurts nobody could catch him. He was an elite runner, but I never thought he was going to be an elite thrower. Well, he's become a very good passer. So you gotta really do your homework on these guys. Yes, you can go, and who knows what that guy is going to be. You can't sit here on February 12th and predict what the Jets should do at quarterback.
The Official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
No, you definitely can't. And you were boots on the ground in Mobile. I don't know how you do it all, brother. I can't keep up with you. But you were in Mobile before you were in New Orleans, before you were in Los Angeles. And I know you're going to be traveling again this weekend. But here are some names out there that people are talking about, top prospects in the 2025 NFL draft. I can't believe we're already saying that, Baldy, 2025. But Cam Ward from Miami, Shadur Sanders, of course, from Colorado, Jackson Dart from Mississippi, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, a dual threat. Will Howard from Ohio State, of course, wins the national title. Tyler Shuck. I just saw Todd McShay put something out there last night saying that this guy might be one of the top 4 athletic prospects at the quarterback position. Kyle McCord, who played at Syracuse, Quinn Ewers from Texas. All those names are guys that we're going to be hearing in April.
We are, and we're going to hear about them for the next 3 months, and we're going to put them through elite scrutiny for the next 3 months lead up to the draft. I mean, whether it's the combine, I'll be at the combine at the end of February, whether it's the pro days, the workouts, really grinding the film and going through these guys. We're going to get a much better composite on what these guys are. But at the end of the day, we're going to fall in love with Milroe's athleticism and his arm strength. But that happens to every single prospect. We're going to fall in love with some things, not in love with some things. But the game that's played in college is a completely different game than the NFL. And the maturity level, the commitment to the game, all those things get exposed if you're not elite at all those things once you get inside, the building. you know, the Jets went through this with Wilson from BYU. Like, he didn't have the commitment or the understanding of the game necessary to become a top prospect. And he kept falling into the same old traps. Now, maybe he gets rescued in Denver and Sean Payton does some things with him and he gets a second act like some of those other guys we just mentioned. It's possible. But, like, the Jets have to get this right. Whatever they do, they have to get it right. And I'm not saying –
Baldy, I wanted to ask you this. With that being said, just because the Jets have the 7th overall selection and they need a quarterback doesn't necessarily mean if they stay there, they should take a quarterback at 7.
Well, they should take – I can't say that they should take a quarterback at 7 if it's no matter what. Like,
right.
Just because there's a quarterback on the board at 7, and there will be, that you should take him. You have to take him if the organization completely is in agreement that this is a guy to build around. And they'll know a lot from the visits and pro days and sitting down with him if he's the guy. But it's the most important thing that Darren Mucci's going to do here in his first year is to identify that player, whoever, whether it's Dart or Milrow or Leonard, whatever. Like, he's going to get measured by that. Denver got it right with Bo Nix.
Hey, we got months ahead to be discussed in the draft, but some pundits have pegged defensive tackle Mason Graham for the Jets there at number 7. And you've been talking about that Philadelphia defensive line. That'd be an interesting pairing up front on the interior. Graham next to Quinnen Williams.
Well, not just Graham, but I was in Mobile. I think this is the deepest and best defensive tackle draft we've seen in a long time. Like, there's going to be – you can find him in almost every round. But you can look at Darius Alexander at Toledo, who had an unbelievable final year. Didn't do a whole lot before that, but big, strong, twitchy. Like, and they come in, they're 345 pounds, they're 295 pounds. Like, there's pass rushers, some better than others. There's run stuffers. Like, you can get – in fact, I believe that there's going to be a team that's going to draft 2 defensive tackles in this draft. It's just that deep right now. And so it's a good position if you're looking for that position.
Well, and after everybody just watched the Super Bowl, I would think that everybody's going to be loading up along that defensive line.
Well, I mean, even if you look at, say, I thought the most improved player in this league this year was Nolan Smith of the Eagles. He didn't start. I mean, they had Bryce Huff for the first 6 weeks. Didn't work out. But by the time Nolan Smith got on the field and you watched week to week, like, he had sacks in every postseason game. He blew up. He knocked guards out of the game. Like, his ability to strike and really bring heat off the edge is almost second to nobody in this whole business right now. But draft and develop. He's the 30th pick of the draft. And here he is in his second year. I think he's going to be an elite player. Like, Jackson, like, if you look at, some of these other players that they drafted, they all developed. So, Clinton Hurt, the defense line coach, did a great job, really identifying these guys and improving them.
Hey, I wanted to ask you about the new regime, Aaron Glenn, Darren Mucci. Glenn, I tweeted this the other day. I saw this in an article written by Dan Wetzel, and I loved it. Everybody doesn't fit with what we do because not everybody can take it. It's for the tough. It's for the grinders. It's for the gritty. It's for the guys who want to improve on a day-to-day basis, and you are never satisfied. This guy, that's some sweet music for you, Baldy. Tell us your thoughts on Aaron Glenn coming back here to the Jets.
I'm excited about the hire because of the things that he stands for. And there's going to be zero tolerance, for everything from being late to lack of effort to not being in the training room. I mean, you're going to be held accountable. And like, I don't think you're going to get a lot of fiery speeches out of Aaron Glenn, but I think the big thing is I got to see development from the classroom to the offseason walkthroughs to the practice field to the game. I got to see players develop. Like, player development is music to my ears, and that's coaching, and that's teaching, that's demanding, that's never being satisfied, that's finding those type of players that are never satisfied. You heard Patrick Mahomes on the stand after the game, after the devastating loss, saying this one's going to stay with me a long time. I'm never going to forget this. I'm never going to forget this day. And that's fuel going into the offseason for Patrick Mahomes. But those are the players you want, that they're never going to be satisfied.
Aaron Glenn is going to be no BS, going to demand accountability, going to make sure that these guys know what the standard is. But at the same time, I also think he's going to know when to love the players up as well. Would you? Yeah.
Knock him down, knock him down. You can't do that. Everybody is wired a little bit different. You motivate different players differently as you get to know your players. The master of all time was Bill Parcells. But, you know, everybody wanted to become a Parcells guy. But he didn't just give you love. Like, you had to earn it. You know, and so I think Aaron understands a lot of that part of it. But, yes, there's going to be that part of it too. There's going to be camaraderie. There's going to be team building. There's going to be a chance to enjoy it. It's not going to just be a grind and knock you down. There's got to be the other part to it. You can push and you can pull. There's a little fine dance that coaches have to go through.
Let's go rapid fire on some of these coaching additions, starting with the coordinator, Steve Wilks. He's been known to be quite aggressive. Aaron Glenn was aggressive as a defensive play caller himself in Detroit. We saw that. Both these guys like to blitz. Baldy, what do you think about AG adding the experienced Wilks?
Well, Steve's got a lot of experience. You know, he's been a head coach. He's been a coordinator. He's done all those things. So he's been in those shoes. That can help Aaron Glenn a great deal. Learn from some of the mistakes Steve might have made in his 1 year or whatever. But I think it's a good hire. Look, the aggressiveness is fine. The Eagles didn't blitz once in the Super Bowl, not one time. All right, their front four dominated the game. So there's a time, not just because you blitzed because you had to in Detroit because you lost some pass rushers and you were forced to do it, or whatever Steve's past is, but it doesn't mean that you have to do that. You have to play to your players' strengths. And so, you know, they're going to get Johnson back on the defensive line, you know, to go with the development of Will and Quinnen. Like, they might be able to do a lot with just their front four.
Tanner Angstrand comes over from the Detroit Lions. He's the passing game coordinator under Ben Johnson there. First-time play caller, but you also have some experience right next to him in Scott Turner, a former offensive coordinator himself.
And Scott Turner, the son of Norv Turner.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's a long line of lineage there about how to protect the quarterback, play action passes. The quarterback is going to be under center. It's not going to be a shotgun offense. There's certain things that you know right now. Now, Detroit had elite personnel, all right? Elite offensive line, Pro Bowlers along the offensive line. Like, there was a lot to work with there in Detroit. So the Jets are not there yet talent-wise. That's, you know, Darren's job. That's Aaron Glenn's job, you know, to start building the wall in front of whatever the quarterback is going to be. They had a pure pocket quarterback, you know, in Jared Goff the last 3 years. They knew where he was going to be every play. There was a lot of creativity to the offense, which is fine once you establish what the offense is. Like, I think you got to establish, okay, we're going to be under center 25, 30% of the time. Play action pass is going to be a big part of it. We're going to take our shots. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to max protect. Like, there's a playbook there that's in existence. But it's all based on what your talent is on offense.
Yeah, that's one of the things AG was asked about, hey, do you like some of the talent here? And one of the things in terms of the comparison with Detroit, he said, hey, listen, when we got in there and we started rolling, he pointed to that offensive line.
I mean, Penei Sewell's first-team All-Pro. Frank Ragnow is an All-Pro center. You know, I mean, they built their wall. They invested heavily in it. You know, I mean, they went out and got Kevin Zeitler in free agency, who's been a stud right guard. You know, Taylor Decker was a first-round pick at left tackle. I mean, they invested way before, honestly, Dan Campbell got there. They'd already invested in the line. But, you know, I remember when Penei Sewell was drafted, do we go get an elite receiver or do we go get the elite right tackle? You know, they made the right choice in getting Penei. You know, and then, you know, they had a good backfield, you know, and they decided to go away from DeAndre Swift, you know, and they went out and got themselves, you know, and drafted an elite player at Alabama in the first round. and said, we want a home run hitter, at running back. So they rebuilt their running back room. I mean, they made some bold moves that a lot of teams, 12 pick on a running back seems far-fetched these days, but it was the right move.
And you can do that when you have an elite offensive line. He's a perfect fit in that offense. Um, so, so I wanted to ask you about Chris Banjo, because I know you were doing Baldy breakdowns on him when he was a player. Only 34 years old. He comes over from Denver. A lot of connections here. When you look at the staff, you can say, okay, Mike Westhoff. Obviously, he played for AG in that defensive backfield when he was in New Orleans, but that guy had a nonstop motor. He's going to bring energy into this building.
Well, you got to have it at that position. You just got to. It's just important. It's just important to be able to do that, to energize a franchise. And so I think the one thing that I've noticed, whether it's Dre Bly, like Aaron's bringing a lot of former players in on his staff. Keeping Sean Jefferson was a good move at wide receiver. Like, I think Detroit had Hank Fraley. They had former players on their staff. And I'm a big proponent of it. Players have to decide if they want to coach, the commitment to it. Aaron obviously made that commitment as a player, rose through the ranks here as the head coach. And I think I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these position coaches rise to become not just coordinators, but head coaches. Like, I think there's a part of him that wants to, you saw what Dan Campbell's done with Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn. Like, part of it, you've seen, honestly, Nick Sirianni do it, Andy Reid do it. Like, part of it is, if you're a great teacher, it's just not the players. It's the coaches as well. Coaching the coaches is a big part of it. And I'm kind of anxious to see how many of these coaches get to that level where they become top coordinators, top lieutenants, or even head coaches.
Yeah, because if we do have a Detroit situation on our hands here at One Jets Drive, the green and white had a lot of success with Aaron Glenn. Let's end here. Jets got to get the quarterback position right. We know that. But as far as Aaron, now that he's got his staff completed, and Darren Muji, what do they got to do over the next couple months? Because ultimately these guys are going to be on the practice field, and they got to look up and down that roster too, because some guys externally, people might say, well, that's a talented dude. He'll be there. Well, not necessarily, because these guys are going to put their stamp, and they also want certain characteristics in their players.
And they deserve that right to look for those things. So honestly, going back and combing the 17 games this year is a priority, and just identifying their type of players, getting to know the players right now as quickly as they can. Some guys are rehabbing, some guys are still in the facility, whatever, but they got to get to know their players, because they got decisions to make about free agency. They got decisions to make about players that are going to be part of this future, not going to be part of this future, whether it's a guy like Devontae Adams, whatever it is. I believe that you should start with youth and young players and young talent. Jermaine Johnson coming back is going to be part. Seeing the development of Will McDonald is good, but I want to, seeing, what they did at certain the linebackers this year and what they've done. Like, I think you got to start identifying players that are going to be part of this regime, whether you're going to pay them, or whether they're going to be 1-year deals or whether they're going to be jettisoned. Like, these are critical decisions as you start to build your new 90-man roster.
Wally, this is awesome as always. The dawn of a new day here for the New York Jets, who will be going in a different direction at the quarterback position under Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji. Hey, Matt, thanks for bringing the pipes out.
Yeah, let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
Finish with this, because I've heard, the Jets obviously do not have a great history, in recent history. It's not been great. We've seen turnover, front office coaches. But just because it hasn't been good, I want Aaron Glenn to get every opportunity and every optimistic opportunity to turn this thing around. He deserves that. He's earned that. And so as an outsider, like, I don't care what happened to Robert Saleh or anybody else that's been coming through those doors. Joe Douglas, like, I'm a fan of some of those guys, but Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji deserve the opportunity to get this thing right. And they deserve every opportunity. It might not happen this year, But they gave that opportunity to Buffalo after a bunch of coaching changes, and they got it right. The Jets deserve a chance, and Aaron deserves a chance to get this thing right.
Well said, my friend.